Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 285 of the J Situation Podcast. I'm recording this on December 2nd, 2025. Well, the end of the year is almost here. That's crazy, man. Hope you're all doing well. We're really busy with testing right now, making that final push to 2025. So if we've been slow to respond, it's because we are super tied up. It's going to be Christmas before you know it, and I'm not working on Christmas, so I'm trying to finish everything before that. On today's episode, we're going to hit the technical discussion of the new TPMS silencer technology that we saw in the reports last week from Battleborn Supply Co. Then, by popular request, we have a new hazard map brief for you this week. It's going to be pretty cool. Some of you wanted a very high back pressure rifle silencer. You wanted to know what those hazards looked like spatially. So I figured, sure thing. We can do that. We're going to show you another extreme end of the spectrum along with it too, because why not? Remember, the power of comparison is always on our side here at PEW-Science. We have so much data. So today you're going to get the SilencerCo Saker 556 and the HUXWRX FLOW 556K. Boy, what a contrast that is. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about that in a short topic after the technical deep dive on the Battleborn Supply Co. stuff, okay? So let's go get on with the show. If you've been here before, oh man, welcome back to another episode. Did you miss us? I missed you. If you're new to the podcast, welcome. I'm so excited for you to be with us today. There are timestamps in the episode description for you to skip wherever you would like. But you know what? If you want to hang around with me a little bit longer, I'm going to read some ads to you because the people that support this podcast are responsible for getting this information out to everybody. So that's really important. We have changed the industry with your help, and these sponsors have made that happen. For example, Legion Athletics. Just got a new order in from them. Pretty excited about it. Nothing you do, exercise, sports, or anything is worth doing without consistency. Even if you don't have time to get into the gym, you can still eat right. You can still get it when the getting's good. Legion Athletics has a lot of products to help you with that. A lot of supplements for your health, whey protein, pre-workout, post-workout, vitamins and minerals, creatine, which is a big one. Everyone should be taking that. LegionAthletics.com. There's a link in the show notes. Code word PEW-Science. You buy one, get one off. Buy one, get 50% off your entire shopping cart using that code. That's a one-time use when you first sign up for them, but then when you're with your first order. But if you keep using that code infinite amount of times, you'll get 20% off, 20% cash back on your entire order all the time. So keep doing that. Okay, get strong. LegionAthletics.com. This episode is also brought to you by Silencer Shop. That's right, really large distributor. They've done a lot for consumers. They've done a lot for the industry, a lot for dealers, large and small nationwide. If you're a new dealer looking to get started in the space, Silencer Shop can really help you maintain lower overhead with their kiosk, do your fingerprints and photos electronically, cut down on errors, simplify your silencer purchasing process. No paperwork errors, just you and your silencer with no drama. Truly is silencer ownership simplified. This episode is also brought to you by Top Gun Range Houston. If you're in the Houston area, even if you're just passing through, man, they're worth checking out. 15-lane indoor shooting range. You can rent rifles and pistols and shotguns and machine guns, and you can even rent silencers, which is relatively rare at shooting ranges. You can check out their firearm rental inventory at topgunrange.com. Please visit them on Instagram and give Kyle a bunch of hell at Top Gun Range. Check them out. They're actually really good guys and girls. They actually like silencers, which is important. This episode is also brought to you by Capital Armory. We love Capital Armory down here in Texas. They're a very large dealer of NFA items. They're a very experienced dealer. Not only can they navigate the paperwork for you and all that jazz that a lot of companies are doing, they're actually very in tune with real performance of suppressed weapon systems. They try to focus on high-performing products. They sell everything, but they do have an appreciation for actual high performance, which is refreshing. And if you live in one of the 42 states where silencers are legal, you can order a silencer in your living room and have it shipped directly to that same living room. That's right. It really is that easy. Capital Armory, silencer shipped directly to your door. And finally, the podcast is brought to you by the PEW-Science Laboratory. We're closing in on our 6th year of operation. I'm the technical director of the lab, and in the interest of public education, we have pushed to continue to support this podcast, to do this podcast for you every week in the hopes of pushing the silencer industry forward one test at a time and educating the public about suppressed small arm weapon physics and silencer physics, okay? It's all about keeping people safe and making sure we set expectations for you and your purchases. Visit PEW-SOFT for the suppression rating. It is the simplest and most accurate hearing safe rating for suppressed small arms based on true human inner ear response of the entire gunshot from before combustion takes place all the way until all the combustion is gone. PEW-SOFT is the home of the silencer sound standard. There are 8 sections. The most in-depth and accurate silencer data analysis on the planet. All available to the public 24/7, PEW-SOFT.com. You can support this podcast and our lab and all the public testing we do by joining with the membership at PEW-SOFT.com. We would be in your debt. That'd be awesome. It's pretty cheap too. Less than the price of a cup of coffee at Starbucks. You get to support the best silencer research in the world. What's not to love? And you know what? If you don't want to give a recurring payment, just donate. Review page, podcast page. That's really easy. And you know what? Something, if you don't want to give any money at all because times are tight and the economy's got you down and inflation's crazy and, you know, your Bitcoin isn't doing well, maybe just spread the word. Let folks know that silencers and guns are awesome. Like and subscribe and give us a 5-star rating on your podcast provider and spread the word. Okay, cool. 2 topics. We're going to hit the technical deep dive on Report 6206 and Report 6207, and hell, we'll even hit the Silencer Hazard Map Brief 8.1.4. We're going to go through all that in the hopes to explain the triply periodic minimal surface baffle structures, and then topic 2, we'll hit the new Hazard Map Brief today, the 8.1.5. Cool. All right. Topic 1, intro at a time of 6 minutes, 56 seconds. All right. We made it. Okay. Topic 1. This is the Battleborn Supply Co. Whiskey Quebec 556 stuff from last week. The 2 silencers, standard and purged. So we had 6206, we had 6207. And what I'm going to do is then we did the hazard map brief in 8.1.4 for both of them. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to split this into 4 subtopics. We're going to hit intro. We're going to recap everything. I'm going to talk about specifically the TPMS geometry and its application to silencers and the pros and cons of that technology. I'm going to give you some technical observations like we typically do for these reports, and then we'll go into conclusions. Okay, I'm going to do this a little bit differently than we usually do. 1, a little to mix it up a little bit. 2, because it's purposeful, and I really want to talk about the technology because that's the important part. It's not for me, and I know, and just so you know, I read all kinds of stuff. You know, I seldom respond on the internet when folks are talking about Pew Science, good or bad. I just let folks have their public discourse, unless I see something totally egregious, and I'll address it. But I usually don't jump in. But I've seen some wild stuff. People say, "Oh, we don't know what is involved with Pew Science testing and how." It's like, well, you do know because there's a frequently asked question page on the website. So if you don't know, it's because you have not wanted to read. So that's 1. 2, I'm going to tell you right now, what we talk about in this podcast is not under contract, meaning that we don't, like in our professional engineering services bids, like in our project bids for companies, we don't include podcast discussion in the scope of work. I'm doing this literally for public education. The only people that the way we're getting revenue from this podcast is our sponsors. It has nothing to do with the companies for these silencers. So I really want you to understand when I put together these technical discussions for you to describe silencer performance, this is a literally just from my brain to you to help you understand the research. We don't have to do this. Okay. and so this talk is going to be based on technology because I feel it's important for you to understand how these silencers work, and I feel it's important for the silencer industry to understand this technology because this technology that we've evaluated last week, a lot of people didn't get super excited because no one knows who the company is. They're the Battleborn Supply, they're real new, But I guarantee you, people are trying to do this stuff in silencers, and if you're not paying attention, you're going to miss stuff. And that goes for people who are making silencers, who are trying to make them and can't make them, folks who know they can do something better, folks who know they can't. This is not just for, like, if you're listening to this and you get something out of it, that's great, but it's not for you only for you. There are like at least 6 groups of people in this world, huge groups of people that might be interested in this, and it could be anyone from manufacturers to consumers to physicists to material scientists. So I ask that you be open-minded and realize that just because you don't know who this company is doesn't mean this isn't important for the world of silencers. And I also want to make it emphatically clear that, or exceedingly clear, that this is, again, from me to you with no motive. We don't have to explain this stuff to you. We are not contractually obligated to do a podcast on a client silencer. Okay, now that I've bored you, but I had to say that because I'm, these damn influencers and everybody, and these anonymous astroturfing accounts from manufacturers and dealers are just so interesting. So if you need an overall in-depth intro to these silencers, go back to episode 284. That's the last episode, topic 102. So these Whiskey Quebec 556 cans, they're Inconel. They're relatively large. They're 2 inch by 7 inch. They're big. Their sectional density is such that they weigh about as much as a Otter Creek Labs Infinity. So when you pick these things up, like I said before, you're going to think they're not Inconel, but they are. And that is important because this is the type of silencer you would probably use for mag dumping or hard use if you were so inclined. If you had this in your arsenal, you would want to mag dump into trash just because of the way it works. It's durable and it has a high early time flow rate, and the purge model has a high late time flow rate. The rear of the silencers they're not hub threaded, but they are threaded. And so whether or not you could adapt a universal mounting scheme to these in the future, I'm not sure, but it is probably doable. The inner diameter of the threads on that back end is larger than hub, so you would have to use a reducer mechanism of some kind. Now, some of this is a moot point. I'm just giving you that information, but some of it's a moot point because these silencers do come with mounts. It has the Flor de la Muerte mount, the flower of death, right? We talked about that last time. And that mount geometry, essentially, it's a reflector diffuser array, and it helps shuttle blast load to the correct places for the material matrix in the core. And I say correct places. Let me rephrase to be exact. The intended places, because I'm not saying what they did is technically correct or incorrect. What I'm saying is it is intended by them to work like it is working. Okay, so you ask yourself, well, would performance change if you change the mount? And you say, well, maybe it would. Maybe it would. So, these are they're about 20 ounces all in with the mount, 7 inches long. And I was speaking about this with some folks on social media last week or whenever we published this. It's really the length and the weight that should matter to most folks for silencers. Just let's get down to brass tacks, shall we? It's really length and weight that matters. Like diameter in general, it really doesn't matter much on, for silencers, and and especially on silencers like this, simply because it's not obscuring your sighting system on your AR. So who cares what the diameter is? Now, diameter might matter to you if you're trying to use a cover that you need to fit and you have the cover already, or maybe you're trying to tuck that silencer somewhere, and maybe you can't accommodate a certain diameter in your particular envelope. Maybe, but by and large, the diameter is really not a huge concern for a lot of people. Now, length and weight are king. Now, to the extent diameter varies to deal with those other parameters, well, so be it. But that doesn't mean that diameter alone matters that much. And I have yet to hear a good cogent argument for when diameter does matter. In fact, there have been several silencer companies who throughout history have tried to say that, oh, well, our silencer is more efficient because it's smaller diameter. It's like, I don't think anyone cares. I don't think anyone cares. I think they care about the length and the weight. So, like I said, these silencers in particular, the Whiskey Quebec 556 family, they have a high early time flow rate, and therefore they're relatively well suited to semi-automatic rifle use in general, I would say. I don't think that these are really designs you would seek out for use on bolt-action rifles. I don't think that's something you would do. I mean, though they will work on bolt-action rifles, I just don't see why you would do that. Maybe if you, I think they're making titanium versions later. You could. I'm not saying you can't. I'm just saying I wouldn't seek it out. There's no reason. The late time flow rate of the two silencer models does differ, and that's important. The standard model and the purge models, they differ because they have a circumferential radial vent array around the bore, and that's at the distal end of the purged model. So as the combustion products enter the silencer, the high pressure, high temperature gas, along with accompanying shock loads, flow into the main core. Okay, they're doing work in the lattice, in the material matrix. And as they enter the further regions of the core, later in that core, and depending on the model you pick, standard or purged, the pressure is going to dump to atmosphere differently. In the standard model, everything's expelled from the same hole the bullet came out of, okay, in the main bore. In the purged model, there is a proportion that's expelled from the vent array. And the $1 million question becomes, which proportions go where? And what happens in the silencer when you do that? Is it just different gas jetting, or are there load mechanisms in the silencer that change due to the stagnation relief in the distal end? In that purged model, when you relieve that stagnation in the distal end, are you also changing the flow state in the silencer? And it's a very interesting train of thought. And to get you thinking about this and really what's happening in these particular silencers, I think we should talk about the specific technology. Let's do that at a time of 17 minutes. 20 seconds. Yeah, I like doing it like this because we're going to flow through this in a way that makes logical sense. So we spoke about this briefly last time. I want to talk about basic TPMS geometry, and not only the technology, but how it is specifically applied to silencers, because I think that's an important distinction which I don't think anyone's ever spoken about publicly, despite the use of TPMS geometries in various industries, okay? And again, we spoke about this briefly last time. Triply periodic minimal surfaces. They're efficient geometries because they have a high surface area to volume ratio. If you need to go back and get a technical explanation of what a TPMS surface is, you can go back to the previous episode, and I'm not going to rehash all that. You can Google it, or you can go back to the previous episode. The high surface area to volume ratio is one of the reasons why these silencers weigh what they weigh, even though they're so large. Okay? They aren't light silencers. They're simply lighter than some silencers would be if they were this big. As we discussed last week, TPMS structures do occur in nature. With the advent of 3D printing, they've really gained popularity in research and industry for heat transfer applications. And you can read all about this on your own time. But as you can imagine, if you can shuttle fluid flow through a material matrix with high surface area to volume ratio, you can do some really interesting things from a heat transfer perspective. Okay? And when we talk about heat transfer and its behavior at certain flow rates, through a material matrix, there are some things that translate to silencer performance in general about if you shuttle, let's say you were working with some kind of incompressible fluid like water, and you were shuttling water at elevated temperature through a material matrix with high surface area. There are some things that translate to silencer performance, but there's some things that certainly do not. Okay, because remember, this is not water through a garden hose when you're shooting your gun. It is not air from an air compressor when you're shooting your gun. It's not the same thing, guys. I like to break down the muzzle blast injection into the silencer into two primary phases, okay? The primary blast and the long duration blowdown. These flows are happening supersonically, and there are shock loads coming out of their barrel. Some of those shock loads they have traversed the entire length of your barrel to the silencer and back, and are traveling through superheated pre-compressed gas, and they've made multiple trips back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. They come out of the chamber right through that gas phase. They're reflecting off your silencer, blast baffle, and muzzle device. They're going back into the barrel, going all the way back to the carrier. They're coming all the way back to the muzzle, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. I'm telling you, it's happening lickety split faster than you can blink. Much faster than you can blink. In fact, orders of magnitude faster than you can blink, because it takes you a very long time to blink. The gas phase is blowing down very gradually, but also it's actually pretty quick relative to typical heat transfer durations. Everything's happening really, really fast. We're concerned with the dimension of time here, like we always talk about. So you have all these dynamic events occurring extremely quickly. It's not air from the air compressor. It's not water from the garden hose. And so in a silencer, you want to create turbulence. You want to trap gas. And in a perfectly optimized silencer for flow rate, you want to redirect blast loads and give them an arduous but long path to exit. Because with that limited time that you have, you want to maximize the time under which you can do work. How much energy can you transfer in this amount of time? You don't have a lot of it. You don't have a lot of time for supersonic flow to traverse the material matrix. So if you can stretch out the time and you can transfer more energy, maybe you can make things quieter if you're a betting man. Maybe, or woman, maybe if you stretch out the duration of what's happening, and maybe if you let things maintain a high flow rate concurrently, maybe you don't stagnate, and maybe you don't induce a lot of system back pressure. I'm speaking in very general terms about like the holy grail of silencer design, right? For semi-automatic weapons. So you look at the Whiskey Quebec series in early time, and it's clear that the blast loads are moving into the core lattice relatively quickly. It's clear from our test data. Even on the overgassed M4, it's clear. We see a fairly strong performance from the non-purged model. And now the question becomes, are your path lengths long enough to maximize the time over which you act on those expanding gases? Is the TPMS structure matrix in the silencers a standalone matrix? Or is it coupled with other structures and used as a power-up? I'm asking this question rhetorically, because I already know the answer in here. So, see, because I would like to draw the parallel with PIP technology here, the stuff used in the PTR and Dillon silencers. I think with PIP, from what I've seen in the implementations that we've tested at PewScience, the PIP stuff's used in a very clever way. The designers of those silencers are using traditional baffle structures, and they're using PIP in conjunction with those structures, you see. So what they're doing, they're taking advantage of similar physics to a TPMS array in some ways, with smaller porosity. Okay. And when you look at this, I think high surface area features in and of themselves do belong in silencers, but I also think that due to the types of supersonic flows to which we subject the silencer internals, I think we need to manage those high surface area structures with more gross geometric features. I think that, you know, when you're sending flow to different regions, maybe you implement efficient heat transfer mechanisms in that transport. You know, like maybe on the way, it's like you're. If I could use a crude analogy, maybe you're taking your kids to school in the car, and you've packed them a great lunch, and they're gonna, because they have a big day and they have a lot of things to do, but maybe you stop off at the corner store and you give them some extra granola bars that they'll be able to eat between classes because they're going to be using so much energy. And maybe the PIP are those granola bars on the way, with the efficient trips they're going between classes with the baffles. Maybe TPMS, maybe they're just eating granola bars and they didn't have the full meal. Gosh, I don't know if that analogy worked out right, but look, I'm not trying to Monday morning quarterback, but I am saying I think these new whiz bang geometries, I think you really gotta, if you want to get the most out of them, maybe only using those is not the answer. This will become more clear as we continue with this research, but I think some of you might feel this is an abstract state. These are abstract statements, but because I'm not showing you a picture, I think it'll become more clear, maybe especially when we look at the subsonic performance of the PTR Vent 1 later. I'm not Monday morning quarterbacking, but I am saying this takes careful consideration. And I want, here's a good example. Here's a good historical example. Look back to the Knight's Armament Mark 23 silencer and the crimp cone baffle. High surface area for such a generation of silencer, yes, but also some key features of a traditional baffle, obviously. They compounded the benefits there as like a power-up. Primitive example, but pertinent example. Okay. But what if you don't compound the benefits? What if you want to go it alone with your granola bars here? Let's talk about pros and cons. I'm going to give you pros and cons of high surface area, high porosity structures without traditional baffle geometry. You pros and cons physically. Major pro of high surface area structures, high degree of heat transfer. No one is debating that. Another major pro is potentially high flow rate at the same time you have high heat transfer. Sounds like win-win to me. What's a potential con? Potential con is that you don't have enough heat transfer to offset the loss of turbulence and offset the loss of stagnation and or the redirection that of the gases and the shock loads you might get from traditional designs. Maybe your flow rate's too fast for your heat transfer rate. I'm just saying maybe. I'm not speaking in absolutes. I'm just giving you some potential cons. What's another potential con? Maybe not a con, but maybe a thing to think about. If you want to increase the time, you have to offset any inefficiencies. You got to button things up at the end. And if you don't button things up at the end, and you purge things, you are never going to get that time back. And you're going to drop suppression performance. You're never going to get that time back. If you are moving so quick, if you're moving so quickly, and you button things up because you're moving too fast, you can increase your back pressure. If you are moving so quickly and you don't increase back pressure and you purge, you're moving so fast, you are never going to get that time back. You can't. Time waits for no man, time waits for no silencer. And if you are moving too fast through your core and you have to vent too, boy, you better make sure you did all the work you could do. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about what we see physically in the instrumented blast testing of the Whiskey Quebec series with these two examples. We'll talk about this by looking at the test data we gathered during that program. Let's do that at a time of 29 minutes and 25 seconds. Okay, one moment. And again, I'm not saying these are bad silencers. I want to have these discussions because this is the future of silencer technology, trying things like this. And, You can't just sit on YouTube and pretend. We have to examine this stuff, right, guys? All right. So overall technical observations. You can pull up report 6206, 6207, and if you want, hazard map brief 8.1.4. I don't know why it's not titled. I got to fix the website. Website's stupid the way it's... Okay. I'm going to start with the hazard map brief. It tells the story very quickly, and then we're going to drill down. That's the way I'm going to do that today. When you pull up the brief, you have two hazard maps, okay? The standard silencer on top, the purged on the bottom. Now, bottom line, the muzzle suppression rating of the standard unit is higher than the purged unit, and the shooter's ear suppression rating of the purged unit is higher than the standard unit. Okay, the standard silencer is putting out a high flow jet, but it's more controlled than the high flow jet of the purged silencer. And that makes sense due to the purged model having a radial vent array around the primary bore, remember? Okay, in both maps, you can see the hazards for the shooter are not low. Okay, it's a untuned 14.5 inch M4. They're simply lower for the purge model. Okay, you can see that in the case of the standard model, there's areas flanking either side of the shooter. They're somewhat safer. Somewhat safer because the muzzle blast is more controlled, isn't it? Yes, it is. That blooming that you see in the hazard from the purge model, the purge muzzle blast, it's very dominant in that forward hemisphere, right? Yeah. And it even makes its way back to the shooter. So in general, if you're standing right next to the shooter, right next to that guy or girl, you're probably sitting in the mid-30s suppression rating. If you're more forward, adjacent to his weapon, his or her weapon, you're going to get into that high 20s to low 30s. If you're the shooter, you're going to be low to mid 20s. If you're behind the shooter, you're going to be in the mid 30s to 40s. So it just depends where you are, right? So these are modeled engineering level estimates, but they're representative of real hazards spatially in the free field. And if you're near reflecting surfaces other than the ground, these hazards will increase. Just know that, okay? So these contours are going to look different when you are near a surface. You can look at the first hazard map report 8.1.1 on the website if you want to look and see some samples of that, okay? Okay. Now that you've seen the big picture, that was 10,000 foot view. That gave you all the answers, actually. If you looked at 8.1.4, you have all the answers for risk, human risk, from blast at least. Okay. Now let's talk about the physics. Okay. If you pull up 6206 now in the report 6206 for the standard model bottom line up front, 33.5 at the muzzle, 23.2 at the ear. You just saw it in the hazard map, right? And the hazard map's right below the figure 2. You can see that in the report. Mid-length gas M4. Okay, figure 1. You scroll down here to all the way down to figure 1A. Now that shows a very unique signature. That's the blast overpressure in the free field. It's the plot has like an orange curve on it because shot 6 is orange and it's overlaid over everything because it's the last of the 6 shots to be fired. They're all overlaid to show consistency. The signature in figure 1 is very unique. You have a very fast initial pressure dump, and then you have a very long duration blowdown phase. That high early time flow rate allowed us to saturate the core, and due to the volume of the silencer, it takes a very long time to blow down. And that is what you were seeing the blast pressure history in figure 1. The jetting is throttled significantly in a very big way. The momentum dump characterized in the impulse histories in figure 2 tells the same story, but it tells it very directly. Notice the big impulse event followed by the long duration decay in all of the shots. This is exactly what I've just described. It's just a different space. Now, but a big thing here, and it's something that goes into our pros and cons list that we just spoke about, pros and cons of high surface area to volume structures used in the way they're being used. It just so happens these are TPMS structures, but we just talked about pros and cons. One thing that really is relevant to a pros and cons list in structures like this is first round pop and FRP. or should I say more succinctly, the arresting of it, the suppression of it. You have relatively pronounced FRP, you have relatively pronounced event. It's described in research note 2 of the report. If you want to read more detail, the interesting thing, and this is interesting, it's very interesting, and particularly with the standard end model, not the purge model, the standard end model, the FRP signature is only 40% more severe than subsequent shots on this model. And the theory here about why that is what we think is happening. Pew Science, what we think is happening is that the differential being lower than we would think is probably because it's a really short duration gas dump in early time, and then the long duration throttle kind of coalesces down at 31 milliseconds, so it's not that big a deal after that. Now after that first shot, man, things are incredibly consistent, actually scary consistent, which actually it should be comforting you. And we would expect it to happen. We would expect both FRP to happen. We would expect that to happen. We would expect consistency post FRP to happen as well with this type of silencer. We would. Now again, back to the pros and cons list. You want that early time flow rate through the TPMS structures, yes. But you haven't buttressed your flow. So now your FRP is going to propagate as easily as it can. It has unimpeded, frankly. It's one of those compromises of using a lot of matrix structures with less traditional baffle structures in this particular way. I'm going to keep going back to that point. When you have very direct flow paths, this silencer, even through all the complexities it has, at the end of the day, like blur your eye, squint your eyes, blur them, cross your eyes. Look at this. In hazard space, this is sort of like an RC2 with less gas in your face. It's interesting. Performance-wise, the waveforms look completely different. The risk is similar, though, and it took a way bigger design envelope to do it. Why? Why did it take such a big design envelope to match RC2 performance and exceed it in back pressure? Well, because of the way the silencer is working. It's not that they like, oh, of course it performs like an RC2. It's big. No. They had to make it that big because of the technology, the way that this technology works. To get the efficacy of this specific technology, they had to make the size it is. The chicken and egg thing is real, and it's important to think about it like this, because you're gonna if you get too gross in your assessment, you'll miss things. I was gonna use another cliche, but I'm trying not to. Okay, when you look at the shooter's ear data of this particular silencer in reports 206, your FRP is backloaded in the impulse waveforms. And so you can, if you want to read more about that, report 6110 and 6111 on your own time. For the layman, what this means is that ejection port blast is driving things in early time. And this is the solid end cap, or no, it doesn't have an end cap, it's 3D printed, but it's the solid end model. We would expect that. The ejection port blast is higher because the flow rate's not high enough. Okay, so now I want you to do, we're going quick, keep up. Now pull up report 207, 6207. Okay, yes, stay with me. Same drill now. Muzzle suppression rating drops to 30.6. Ear suppression rating goes up to 25.8. So now what are you doing? You look at the hazard map right before the rating, right below the suppression rating figure at the top of the page. Look at that hazard map that's right there. Now you're blooming out the front. So you're blasting the shooter less with your ejection port blast is less severe. Now you have less party in the back and more party in the front, right? Because you uncorked your silencer, you're letting more flow out the front, less back pressure, and that's kind of what you're doing with the purge model. Now, is that always how that works when you crack open the front of a silencer? Well, no, it's not always how it works. But in the case of these two silencers, it's exactly how it works. Okay. Literally, standard versus purge models. Very good case study. So now you scroll down to figure 1 in report 207. This time, you still have that big jet at first, but now you have less throttle. Your momentum dump is more, or almost, I was going to say more linear. It is almost linear when you look at figure 2 with the impulse. And now, what's the huge thing that I really want you to take away from this? And you're not going to notice it as much when you just look at the plots, but I'm going to tell you, when we do comprehensive analysis of these waveforms, you have much more severe relative FRP with the purged model, because of the same drawbacks of TPMS let me say that a different way. Because of the same drawbacks of using TPMS without using enough traditional baffle structures with it, or without using enough rerouting of gases that we spoke about with the standard model. Now you're magnifying the deficiency because you ran out of time. Your first ancillary combustion event, the FRP, that's propagated without enough impediment during that first shot, now your distance to free vent is shorter. Your time to free vent is faster in the first shot because you're reaching the end of the silencer and you're there to atmosphere. Now that vent array in the purged model, to be clear, it's magnifying the result of the FRP. The FRP event of the two silencers is identical in the silencer. They're the same silencer almost. But what gets to atmosphere with the purged model is more severe. Do you understand what I'm saying? So this is purely due to venting. It's an excellent case study, like I was saying. The fact that happened in these tests should give you great comfort that this testing is consistent. We have not broken physics. All is right in the world. Okay? The relative behavior between the standard model and the purged model is expected. It is expected. Okay, so and another thing that should give you comfort is the data measured at the shooter's head. Keep scrolling if you're in 207 still. If you're in 207. Members, when you look at this data, you'll see the impact of less ejection port blast directly, which is really cool. Figure 4B is the smoking gun. It's a smoking gun. Look how now the FRP is front loaded. Greater contribution of muzzle blast earlier at the shooter's face than there was previously. Why? Because relative to ejection port blast, there's more muzzle blast. What does that mean? FRP is muzzle driven, guys. FRP is muzzle driven. Now you're front loading your impulse curve with FRP from the muzzle. Ejection port blast isn't clouding it as much. Remember, report 6110 and 6111 if you want to see this controlled for the exact same silencer with a tuned host to show how this manifests in a more exaggerated way. But this is subtlety that you'll see. You can't fool this. You can't fool this. You can't fool the test data. This is blast test data. It's real as a heart attack real. Okay, this is definitively, this silencer has lower back pressure definitively. Okay, cool. Oh, also definitive in the waveforms, the bulk carrier group velocity is reduced. So, and this was all with one distal vent array. The high early time flow rate, the low alpha is in both silencers the same. But the purged model has a lower omega than the standard model because of late time. So that back pressure drop that you see in this test, even if late time, it made all the difference. It was a pure omega change. You know, for you veteran Pew Science readers and listeners, pure omega change did this. Alpha was constant. The silencers are identical in the blast chamber. I know that because I've seen cutaways. Okay, one moment. So you look at all this in totality, and you get what's shown in the bar chart in Figure 5. Scroll all the way down. And Figure 5 in both reports is the same. I did that on purpose. These silencers are toward the top. In red, they're toward the top because they're with the other relatively high low omegametric configurations, the high flow rate configurations. You can see that they're actually doing extremely well. there compared to those other silencers who have similar late time flow rates. But why is that? Why are they doing so well compared to the silencers with similar late time flow rates? Well, they're 7 inches long and 2 inches in diameter, and they can have a high flow rate and still suppress well because they have enough time. They have enough time. They have enough room because of the way they work. They have enough time for their surface area to do some work. The solid version is sort of punching up with the vented 7.62 end cap version of the Infinity. Almost. The Infinity has a very high early and late time flow rate. But then it's not all roses. When you take an advanced hybrid and then you button it up and control blast propagation more, those come into its own. Look what the same Infinity does when you put a 5.56 vented end cap on it. Okay. Uh-oh. It stomps the Whiskey Quebec in overall suppression. Why? Why does the Infinity do that? And it doesn't matter if you love or hate the Otter Creek Labs brand. It doesn't matter. I can pick any advanced hybrid and have the same discussion with you. I just picked this one because it's right in the chart. Why? Why is it performing better? Because it's using traditional baffle structures with hybrid elements. It's a combination. That's why. The TPMS stuff in the Whiskey Quebec silencers are going to need some help if they're going to compete for the highest levels of performance. And that is objectively true. That's them's the breaks, kid. Like, that's true, and it's simple as that. And this is the end result of the physics discussion I was speaking with you about earlier. I'm trying to keep this podcast to around an hour or so, and it's these Whiskey Quebec silencers are still high performance silencers. Don't get it twisted, and they're still doing well, especially on this host. But for the size, they can be outperformed because of the way the technology is implemented. Now, are these things going to get better? Well, absolutely. Are they good enough for you right now? They might be. But I'm saying the way this technology is implemented, there's a reason why the performance is what it is. Okay? Cool. Now let's talk big picture. 47 minutes and 24 seconds. Okay. Oh, it's only 8:30. That's awesome. I might be able to get to bed on time today. I think TPMS structures for silencers are promising. I do. I also think they're going to need some help if silencers that use them want to achieve the highest levels of performance. It almost makes me think of the C product stuff, which is not the same as a TPMS structure at all, but the concept is similar. Not the geometric concept, but the rough heat transfer concept is similar. It almost makes me think of that, but they use more hybrid. Anyway, as it stands right now, these Whiskey Quebec silencers, I think they bring a strong total package. I think they're larger than other systems. I think they need that size because of the way they work. Based on the particular implementation of the technology they're using, I think that's why they're the size they are. Now, could they shrink these because using different implementation of TPMS? I think so. Add some traditional baffle structures with a TPMS without sacrificing flow rate. You can do that. There's a lot of things you can do. Now, are they going to? I don't know. I'm not telling people what to do. I'm not trying to Monday morning quarterback, but I'm telling you why you're seeing what you're seeing. I think these two silencers are very modern. I think these are probably some of the most modern silencers we've evaluated. Just because the performance isn't the highest you've ever seen doesn't mean the silencers aren't extremely modern. And I'm not saying modern is good. I'm not saying modern is bad. I'm using it as an adjective because it's important you know that this technology is relatively new in silencers. I think it's very new. I think probably out of all the new silencer technology that we've evaluated that's using geometry purely in this spirit without a ton of baffle structures, I think this stuff's probably showing some of the best performance in that group. I think, you know what I mean? I think it is. So I'm really excited to see how it plays out. What else folks come up with. Who else may use similar technologies? I think maximizing surface area for heat transfer, but also managing flow, I think is the silencer holy grail. And I don't think you can do just one of them. I think you got to do both. I do. So thanks, Battleborn Supply Co. for trusting us to perform this work. You have enabled us to teach a lot of people how this technology works, and I think this will improve the industry for the better, at the very least. Okay, let's move into the hazard map brief for this week at a time of 50 minutes, 17 seconds. All right, good time. All right, Silencer Hazard Map Brief 8.1.5. Where is it? I have it in front of me here. I'm going to publish it in the morning for you. It'll be live with you with this podcast probably, and the image will be on the YouTube thumbnail so you can read or see it. So SilencerCo Saker 556 versus HUXWRX FLOW 556K on the Mark 18. This is a popular request thing. Show us a high back pressure conventional 556 can. So we went back into the archives all the way back to report 653 from 2021. Ran the test. This is like the second Mark 18 test we ever published. Ran the test results through PEW-SOFT HD, through the hazard mapper code. And it's my hope that the hazard map for the Saker helps illustrate operator risk. When you're using these legacy designs, and then, you got to ask yourself, well, does a HUXWRX FLOW 556K save you? Are you saved by the high flow rate? Maybe you're not. You look at this brief, it's like, it's actually funny to me, how fast consumers and the public picked up on this. I mean, literally one of the first requests when we launched the hazard map section was, hey, you showed us some hybrid high flow rate silencers. What happens with the super high back pressure silencer? What happens? And I was actually so glad you asked that, because when we published this, I wanted the public to drive where it went. In the beginning, believe me, I'm not taking my hands off the wheel for too long. It's like when you let your kid drive, you're not gonna, you let your hands off the wheel for a little bit, but no. For the early stages, I just wanted to see. I didn't comment a lot. I just wanted to see, and sure enough, your intuition was so strong. So, well, what happens when you have really high back pressure? And so I went to the rankings table at pewscience.com in section 7. You can go to the free one. I went to the free rankings table. I sorted by shooter zero suppression rating ascending, meaning that I was looking at the really, really loud hazardous crap. And then I saw this gem of a silencer, the old SilencerCo Saker 556, tested with a direct thread mad mount, no less, back in 2021. I remember that program like it was yesterday. It's a good program. And it was old back then, I thought. Now it's 5 years older. And I think it stands up as an excellent case study for the industry. I think it's more pertinent than ever, which is ironic. So in this brief, you're going to see the Saker 556 hazards. You're going to see the FLOW 556K hazards. Same weapon, same ammo. And when I say same weapon, I do mean same. We list the specs. It's off the shelf. So you're going to see here that we're showing you two extremes. On one end, total gas trap, no venting. No venting in the blast chamber, no venting from the distal end, no venting in the baffles. High back pressure town USA, population U. The Saker's the mayor. He's serving multiple unlimited terms. He's not going anywhere. He's got the cops in bed with him. It's just the whole thing. Now, on the other extreme, you got Silencer from HUXWRX, has the highest flow rate possible. It's their short 556 model, the 556K. When this burst on the scene, dude, it was a big deal. I remember that because we were there. We were the ones to publish the laboratory data and analysis. We're the only ones to publish it. And people saw the shooter's ear suppression rating. Boy, did they get excited. And I got excited too. And oh, boy, boy, did the other silencer companies get so mad when we published that they took their toys and went home and started testing indoors. They got so mad when the HUXWRX FLOW 556K data was released. They got so mad because they couldn't believe how it could score so well. Oh, how did it get such a high suppression rating? I used this silencer on one of my personal machine guns. I thought it was so cool how it was directing hazard forward there. And you keep using this enough, or you hear it, and you become acutely aware relatively quickly that the muzzle suppression rating sure is low. See the silencer companies, they forgot that you're supposed to look at the muzzle and the ear. They got so tied up with the big number at the top of the page that they panicked. They panicked publicly. They panicked publicly in a spectacle worldwide. Yelled from the rooftops. They were so upset. If they would just have looked at if we had only done hazard maps back then, maybe they wouldn't have freaked out. Look at the hazard map for the FLOW 556K, how incredibly hazardous it is everywhere except where the shooter is. I wonder why, right? Yeah. And what you think you can't hear? You think that it's just what you hear? No. In late time, you're going to hear that boomy craziness forward of the muzzle in the forward hemisphere. You're going to hear it. It's just that it's not acutely hazardous to you because you're in the free field, guys. This is what these hazard maps are for. It's to make people come to Jesus and see. Look, guys, these are the same suppression ratings we've been showing you for 5 or 6 years. It's just that now you can visualize them and now you can stop freaking out. Right? So the big takeaway here, guys, the big takeaway here from this brief is that the goal of the silencer industry that should be, but besides stealing your money, the goal of the silencer industry, the goal of companies should be to get better performance than the Saker with comparable flow rate to the FLOW 556K. That should be your performance goal. Go forth and multiply. Go forth and do that. Okay? I've just given you the assignment. And you may say it's impossible. I say keep chasing. I say keep innovating. You have hybrid designs that are doing some really incredible things nowadays. And we're going to put some hazard maps out for those too. This is a slow trickle for you. So you can compare this visually, to what these are doing. But because I do want you to eventually see, if you don't already understand it from the suppression ratings we've published for some of these modern silencers, I do want you to see eventually visually just how special some of the new silencers are. I think this will put things in context. Okay. I'll say a word of caution to all of you as we move into 2026. Be very careful with unproven and untested designs. Backpressure is something you may not hear much about from a silencer reviewer doing a video. They might do a video on a silencer and tell you how great they think it sounds, and or whatever. And somehow with an AR-15 with no hearing protection on, somehow they're not going to be talking about backpressure, and I just scratch my head sometimes. Say, gosh, most AR-15 silencers on untuned weapons are really hammering the operator with blast load. And I think the suppression rating of the shooter's ear for the Mark 18 and the M4 in our rankings, I mean, we color-coded the rankings, guys, to help you understand that red is bad and green is good. And there's not a lot of green in a shooter's ear suppression ranking for an AR-15. So just keep that in mind. Quantitative data on standard platforms is very important. We would not be doing this if it wasn't. Okay? So I hope this helps you. This is a very good, this case study, guide. This is short. In this article, you can read this on the toilet. This is, don't do that, or do it, whatever you want to do. Super short, really, really, really short. 2 pictures. I'm going to post the pictures side by side with social media so you can see them. If this doesn't illustrate to you free field hazards in accordance with flow rate, email me, please, and I will be happy to help you understand. We'll talk about it at length, because this is one of the most basic concepts you have to understand. We'll get more advanced later, but this is one of the most basic concepts to understand. Okay, cool. Hit us up with questions. Let me know if you want to go deeper with explanation in these briefs. I can go deeper. They're meant to be short. There's millions of data points, so there's a lot to dissect. At the end of the day, you can also go to the reference reports. They're there. So testing's busy right now. Again, final push for 2025. Our schedule's packed. Not sure what we're going to be publishing next week, or if we're going to have time. We'll see. Okay? When I know, you'll know. All right. Stay safe out there, friends. I will talk to you folks again soon. All right, bye.